The thunder cracked across the Montana sky like a whip, but Katherine Blackburn barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. Clutching her valise with white-knuckled fingers, she stumbled down the muddy main street of Silver Creek, her swollen belly a testament to the shame that had driven her from her home in Boston. The year was 1878, and an unmarried woman with child had few options and fewer friends. Rain pelted her face, mingling with tears she could no longer distinguish as her own. The coach had departed hours ago, leaving her alone in this rough-hewn mining town with nothing but a handful of coins and the crushing weight of her family's final words. Her father's face, twisted with disgust, haunted her. "That mistake you carry will not bear our name," he had spat as he thrust her trunk and a one-way ticket west into her trembling hands. Katherine's foot caught on a loose board, sending her sprawling into the mud. The impact jarred her, and she instinctively curled around her belly, protecting the life within. 6 months along now, there was no hiding her condition, no pretending she was merely plump or ill. Her once fine blue dress, now travel-worn and splattered with mud, clung to her frame as she struggled to rise. "Madam? You all right there?" A deep voice cut through the downpour. Katherine looked up, blinking rainwater from her eyes. A tall figure loomed above her, silhouetted against the stormy sky. Strong hands reached down, gently lifting her to her feet with surprising ease. I'm fine," she managed, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The man before her was perhaps 30, with eyes the color of the Montana sky on clear days and a face weathered by sun and wind. His broad shoulders were draped in a rain-slicked duster, and beneath his sodden hat, Katherine glimpsed sandy hair that curled slightly at the temples. "Luke Ironwood," he introduced himself, tipping his hat as rainwater cascaded from its brim. "And you're about to drown standing up, Mississippi. Katherine Blackburn." She glanced down at her muddy dress and swollen abdomen, waiting for the familiar look of judgment to cross his face. Instead, Luke Ironwood merely nodded toward a building across the street, its windows glowing with warm lamplight. "The Silver Creek Inn's got hot food and dry rooms. Might be a better place to decide your next move than drowning in the middle of the street." Before Katherine could protest, he had gathered her valise and offered his arm. Something in his steady gaze gave her pause. There was no pity there, no contempt, just a simple offer of assistance. "Thank you," she whispered, accepting his help. The inn was mercifully warm, the scent of stew and fresh bread a stark contrast to the driving rain outside. The proprietress, a stout woman named Mrs. Whitfield, took one look at Katherine's condition and ushered her toward the fire without a single question. "Poor thing soaked through," Mrs. Whitfield clucked, glancing at Luke. "You're doing, Ironwood?" "Found her outside," Luke replied, setting Katherine's valise beside a worn armchair. "Thought you might have a room." Mrs. Whitfield's eyes flickered to Katherine's belly, then back to her face. "Of course we do. Girl needs a hot meal and rest, by the looks of it." She bustled off toward the kitchen, leaving Katherine alone with her unlikely rescuer. "Why are you helping me?" Katherine asked softly, her hands instinctively cradling her stomach. "You don't know me." Luke Ironwood studied her for a long moment, rainwater dripping from his coat onto the worn floorboards. "My ma used to say a person's measure isn't taken when things are easy, but when they're hard." He shrugged. "Besides, Silver Creek might look rough, but it's not the sort of place that leaves women and children in the rain." Katherine swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in her throat. After months of scorn and rejection, his simple kindness felt almost foreign. I don't have much money. I can only stay a night or two. Let's worry about that after you've eaten and dried off," Luke suggested, a slight smile softening his weather-beaten features. He turned to leave, then paused. "Silver Creek's a growing town, Miss Blackburn. Might be opportunities here for someone willing to work." With that, he nodded and stepped back into the storm, leaving Katherine staring after him, wondering if she'd imagined the entire encounter. The following days passed in a blur as Katherine settled into a small room at the Silver Creek Inn. Mrs. Whitfield, despite her brusque manner, proved unexpectedly kind, offering Katherine work helping with the laundry and mending tasks she could manage despite her advancing pregnancy. "Can't have you on your feet all day in your condition," Mrs. Whitfield had said matter-of-factly. "But your stitching is fine enough to earn your keep." Luke Ironwood appeared occasionally, taking meals at the inn or stopping by with oddly thoughtful items: a rocking chair that needed minor repairs, soft flannel that could be fashioned into baby clothes. He never mentioned her condition directly, treating it as naturally as the changing seasons. A week into her stay, Katherine learned that Luke owned the largest cattle ranch outside Silver Creek, having built it from nothing after returning from the war. The townsfolk spoke of him with respect, though they noted his solitary nature. "Lost his wife and baby during the war," Mrs. Whitfield explained one evening as they folded sheets. "Fever took them while he was fighting. Came west afterward, hardly spoke for 2 years. Katherine's heart ached at the thought. "He seems at peace now. Time heals, child. Not completely, but enough to go on." Mrs. Whitfield gave her a knowing look. "Speaking of which, you haven't said much about your own situation." Katherine's hands stilled on the linen. "There's not much to tell. I trusted someone I shouldn't have. When he discovered my condition, he disappeared. My family." Her voice caught. "They said my baby's a mistake. A shame upon their good name." Mrs. Whitfield snorted. "Men who run aren't worth the boots they wear. As for family turning their backs, well, I've seen worse become better, given time. I don't think there's any going back," Katherine admitted. "And perhaps that's for the best. I won't have my child raised where they're considered a mistake." The older woman nodded, her expression softening. "Well, you've got time to figure things out. Winter's coming, and no one should be traveling in your condition anyway." 2 weeks later, Katherine was arranging wildflowers in the inn's dining room when Luke Ironwood entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. "Miss Blackburn," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I've come with a proposition." Katherine set down her flowers, suddenly conscious of her plain dress and loosely pinned hair. "A proposition? My housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, is getting on in years. She's returning east to live with her daughter next month." Luke shifted, looking almost uncomfortable. "The ranch house needs someone to manage it. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. There's a private room with its own entrance, good pay." Katherine stared at him, stunned. "You're offering me employment? In my condition?" "I'm offering a position to someone who, by all accounts, sews a fine stitch and hasn't shirked hard work despite circumstances that might excuse it." Luke's blue eyes met hers steadily. "The baby's not a concern. There's plenty of room." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Luke considered her for a long moment. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Blackburn. I got mine when I came west. Maybe this is yours." Katherine's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "People will talk. People always talk," Luke replied with a slight shrug. "Mrs. Davis will remain until the baby comes, to ensure propriety and help with the birth. After that, if you wish to stay on, arrangements can be made." It was mad, accepting a position miles from town with her confinement approaching. Yet as Katherine looked at Luke Ironwood's steady, honest face, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. Luke nodded, replacing his hat. "Take your time. The offer stands." 3 days later, Katherine found herself bouncing along in Luke's wagon, heading toward the Ironwood ranch. Mrs. Whitfield had encouraged the move, practical considerations overcoming conventional concerns. Better a proper roof and regular meals than fretting over gossip, the innkeeper had declared. Besides, everyone knows Luke Ironwood's character is beyond reproach. The ranch surprised Katherine with its neat appearance and solid construction. The main house, built of timber and stone, stood 2 stories tall with a wide porch overlooking rolling grassland that seemed to stretch forever. Outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands formed a loose cluster nearby. Mrs. Davis, A thin woman with iron-gray hair and kind eyes welcomed Katherine with practical efficiency. "Glad to have you, Miss Blackburn. Mr. Ironwood's kept this place running, but a man doesn't notice the details that make a house a home." The room that would be Katherine's was larger than expected, with windows facing east to catch the morning light. A connecting door led to a smaller room that, Mrs. Davis explained with a meaningful glance at Katherine's belly, would suit a child nicely, when the time comes. The following weeks settled into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. Katherine took over the household accounts, which Luke had neglected, and found satisfaction in bringing order to the practical aspects of ranch life. Mrs. Davis showed her how to manage the large kitchen, preserve the garden's bounty for winter, and deal with the occasional snake that found its way into the root cellar. Luke himself was often absent during daylight hours, riding out with his men to manage the cattle or handle business in town. Yet evenings frequently found him seated across from Katherine at the kitchen table, discussing books from his surprisingly extensive library or explaining aspects of ranching she found puzzling. "Never thought I'd see the day when Iron Luke took dinner in the kitchen," one of the older ranch hands remarked to Mrs. Davis, unaware that Katherine could overhear from the pantry. "Man ate alone for years. Life changes," Mrs. Davis replied simply. "Sometimes for the better." As Katherine's time grew closer, her movements became more restricted, but Luke seemed to anticipate her needs without her having to voice them. A sturdy banister appeared along the stairs to her room. The rocking chair from town was refinished and placed near the kitchen's warmest corner. Soft blankets and tiny garments, ordered from a catalog in Denver, arrived without explanation. One evening, as October painted the cottonwoods gold along the creek, Katherine found Luke on the porch, staring at the sunset. She joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the growing chill. "When my Emma died," Luke said without preamble, "I thought the pain would kill me too." He didn't look at Katherine, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "She was carrying our first. Neither survived the fever." Katherine remained silent, understanding the rare gift of his confidence. "I came west because there was nothing left for me back home. Built this place thinking hard work would drive out the ghosts." A faint smile touched his lips. "It didn't, not entirely. But it gave me purpose." "Is that why you helped me?" Katherine asked softly. "Because of them?" Luke considered this, then shook his head. "No. I helped you because you needed helping. Stayed helping you because—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Because there's something about you, Katherine Blackburn, that makes this place feel like more than just land and timber." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, and Katherine gasped, her hand flying to her side. Without thinking, she reached for Luke's weathered hand and placed it where her child pushed against the world. Luke's eyes widened as he felt the movement beneath his palm. For a moment neither spoke, connected by the simple miracle beneath their joined hands. "He's strong," Luke whispered, and Katherine was startled to see moisture in his eyes. "Or she," Katherine corrected gently, but didn't remove his hand. "Or she," Luke agreed, and something shifted between them, fragile and undefined but undeniably real. November brought early snow and with it, Katherine's labor. Mrs. Davis took charge, sending for the midwife from town while Luke paced the porch like a caged mountain lion, deaf to the good-natured ribbing of his ranch hands. 20 hours later, exhausted beyond anything she'd ever known, Katherine held her son for the first time. Tiny, red-faced, and perfect, he squalled his objections to the cold world before settling against her breast with surprising determination. "You have a visitor," Mrs. Davis announced later that day, ushering Luke into the room. He stood awkwardly by the door, hat in his hands, his eyes drawn to the bundle in Katherine's arms. "Everyone's saying he's the spitting image of you," he offered. "Hardly seems fair to the little fellow." Katherine laughed despite her exhaustion. "Would you like to hold him?" Luke hesitated, then crossed the room in 3 long strides. With infinite care, he accepted the swaddled infant, cradling him with surprising expertise. "Does he have a name?" Luke asked, one finger gently tracing the baby's cheek. "Samuel," Katherine replied. After my grandfather. The only one who showed me kindness before. She trailed off, unwilling to revisit painful memories. Samuel, Luke repeated, looking down at the sleeping infant. Good, strong name. Katherine watched them, this hard man holding her child with such tenderness, and felt something unfurl in her chest, a warmth she'd thought forever beyond her reach. They said my baby was a mistake, she whispered, tears suddenly blurring her vision. My family, the baby's father, everyone. Luke's gaze lifted to hers, fierce and certain. Then he's the miracle I needed, he said simply. We both did. The winter that followed was the happiest of Katherine's life. Samuel thrived, growing stronger each day. Mrs. Davis departed for her daughter's home in St. Louis, leaving Katherine as undisputed mistress of the ranch house, a role she embraced with increasing confidence. Luke's behavior toward her shifted subtly. He sought her company more openly, bringing her wild flowers in the spring and listening intently to her opinions on everything from cattle breeding to the novels they read aloud by the fire during long winter evenings. When Samuel cried in the night, Luke often appeared, offering to walk the floor with the infant so Katherine could rest. You've no obligation, Katherine told him one night as he returned Samuel, finally sleeping, to his cradle. It's not obligation, Luke replied, his voice low in the lamplight. It's choice, Katherine. Every day I choose this. By Samuel's 6-month birthday, the ranch hands had taken to calling her Mrs. Ironwood. When Luke wasn't present, their knowing smiles suggesting they saw what Katherine herself was only beginning to acknowledge, that what had begun as charity had transformed into something neither she nor Luke had anticipated. Spring brought new calves to the herd and fresh color to the plains. Katherine planted a vegetable garden beside the house, Samuel napping in a basket nearby as she worked the soil. It was there that Luke found her one afternoon, returning early from a trip to town. Letter came for you, he said, holding out an envelope with familiar handwriting, her sister's neat script. Katherine's hands trembled as she took it. How did they find me? Postmaster said a detective came through last month, asking questions. Luke's expression was carefully neutral. Seems your family's been looking for you. The letter contained both apology and plea. Her father had fallen ill. Her mother begged her to return, if only briefly. They had been wrong, her sister wrote, to cast her out. They wished to make amends, to know their grandson. Will you go? Luke asked that evening, after she'd read him the letter. Katherine folded the paper carefully. I don't know. Part of me wants to show them Samuel, to see their faces when they realize what they threw away. She sighed. Another part never wants to see Boston again. Luke nodded, his gaze on the fire. Whatever you decide, there's a place for you here. Always. Is there? Katherine asked softly, gathering her courage. What exactly is my place here, Luke? The question hung between them, weighted with months of unspoken feelings. Luke rose from his chair, crossing to kneel before her. I'd hoped it might be at my side, he said, his voice rough with emotion. As my wife, if you'll have me. Katherine's breath caught. Because of Samuel? Because of you, Luke corrected, taking her hands in his. Samuel is a blessing I never expected, but you, Katherine, you brought light back to this place. To me. People will talk, she whispered, echoing her concern from months before. They'll say you married a fallen woman out of pity. Let them, Luke replied firmly. We'll know the truth. That I'm marrying the strongest, most determined woman I've ever known. That we found each other when we both needed saving. Katherine searched his face, seeing nothing but sincerity in his steady gaze. I love you, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. I've loved you since that day you felt Samuel kick and looked at me like we were both miracles. You are, Luke said simply, and leaned forward to kiss her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. When he pulled away, his smile was like sunrise breaking. So, Katherine Blackburn, will you make an honest rancher of me? They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's newly built church, with Samuel cooing in Mrs. Whitfield's arms and the entire town in attendance. The bride wore a gown of pale blue silk that Luke had ordered from Denver, and if anyone thought it inappropriate for a woman with a child born out of wedlock to wear such finery, they kept their opinions to themselves. "Never seen Iron Luke smile so much," the blacksmith remarked to his wife during the celebration afterward. "Man looks like he won the territory lottery." "Better," his wife replied, watching Luke swing Katherine into a dance. "He found his heart again." Summer came, bringing with it a letter from Katherine's father. His health had improved, and while he stopped short of a full apology, he expressed a desire to meet his grandson. After much discussion, Luke and Katherine agreed to make the journey east in the fall, after the cattle drive. "Are you nervous?" Luke asked as they prepared for bed the night before their departure. Katherine considered the question as she brushed her hair, watching her husband's reflection in the mirror. In the 15 months since she'd stumbled off that stagecoach, everything had changed. The frightened, disgraced girl she'd been seemed like a stranger now. "No," she realized. "I'm not going back as the same person who left. I have you, Samuel, this life we've built." She set down her brush and turned to face him. "Whatever happens in Boston, we'll return home afterward." Luke's eyes softened as he crossed the room to take her in his arms. "Home," he echoed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I like the sound of that." Their journey east was long but uneventful, Samuel proving to be an excellent traveler for a child not yet 2. The Boston they arrived in seemed smaller to Katherine somehow, its familiar streets and customs no longer intimidating. Her family's reunion was initially strained, particularly between Katherine and her father. Yet Samuel, with a child's innocent charm, broke through decades of New England reserve. By their third day, Katherine's mother could scarcely be separated from her grandson, while her father found in Luke a man whose quiet strength matched his own. "You've done well for yourself," her father acknowledged gruffly one evening as they shared brandy in his study. "The man who abandoned my daughter wasn't worthy of her," Luke finished. "But I'm grateful for his mistake. It brought Katherine to Silver Creek to me." On their final night in Boston, Katherine found her sister, Eleanor, in the nursery, watching Samuel sleep. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered, "for not standing with you when it mattered most." Katherine squeezed her hand. "We can't change the past. But perhaps you'll visit us someday. See the ranch, meet our friends. Our very proper neighbors would be scandalized," Eleanor said with a small smile. "Which makes the idea all the more appealing." The return journey to Montana felt like breathing again after too long underwater. As their train crossed the Mississippi, Katherine felt the weight of the East fall away, replaced by the expansive promise of the horizon. When they finally crested the rise that revealed Ironwood Ranch, Luke reined in the wagon, allowing them to appreciate the view. The house gleamed in the autumn sunlight, smoke curling from the chimney where the housekeeper they'd hired in their absence had maintained a welcoming fire. "Pretty sight," Luke remarked, his arm around Katherine's shoulders. "The prettiest," she agreed, Samuel warm against her chest. "Though I have something to tell you that might make it even better." Luke raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I believe Samuel will have a brother or sister by next summer," Katherine said, a smile spreading across her face as Luke's expression shifted from confusion to wonder. "You're certain?" he asked, his voice hushed. "As certain as a woman can be," she confirmed. "Are you happy?" Luke's answer was to gather her and Samuel into a careful embrace, his eyes suspiciously bright. "More than I ever thought possible," he whispered against her hair. "When you stumbled into Silver Creek that day, I never imagined." "Neither did I," Katherine admitted. "But here we are." "Here we are," Luke echoed, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future. "Home at last." As they drove down toward the ranch, Samuel babbling happily between them, Katherine thought of all the twists of fate that had led them here: her disgrace, her family's rejection, that stormy day in Silver Creek. What had seemed like the end of everything had instead been a beginning. "What are you thinking?" Luke asked as they approached the ranch house, where several hands had gathered to welcome them home. Katherine smiled, her hand resting on her still flat stomach where their second miracle was just beginning. "That mistakes can sometimes be the best things that ever happened to us," she replied, "if we're brave enough to see them through." Luke's answering smile was all the confirmation she needed. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, the family they had built from heartbreak and hope, on the foundation of a love neither had expected but both had desperately needed. And as the sun set over the Montana plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Katherine knew with bone-deep certainty that she had finally, truly, found her place in the world.